Most of us often chase rather pumps than established memes. And a green candle is somehow spoiled for us until it's screenshot. We stare at charts, forgetting it changes nothing. We watch charts, but not ourselves. This is a disaster. For as a result of confusing dopamine hits with actual profit, we are destroying our net worth. We are so tied up in FOMO and charts that we've lost all conviction. Time to wake up. What is alpha? Obviously, nobody can say, because it isn't just drawing lines on charts. It isn't rotation meta, that's just an idea. Alpha is the Giga cycle cannot be explained in words.
Oh, 30 push-ups, dude. Let's fucking go.
Let's go. Oh, I love that.
Oh, I like my light. I look like a little cherry tomato. That's fun.
Oh, cherry tomato. What's up, Sean?
Nothing much, man. Just getting the streaming logistics dialed in. That was fun, hey?
Dude, if people understood the pure chaos that just
Oh, no,
was.
now it's your camera. Oh, no, now it's your camera. Oh, no, now it's your internet. Oh, no, now it's your sound. Now it's your microphone. Now it's your firmware.
Oh, man, that was fun.
Good shit.
That was. But, yeah, we're here. What's up, man? What'd you lift today?
Haven't done anything yet today. I did do a nice beach walk, though. Did some stoic meditation, just feeling little woo-woo, boys, little woo-woo. They give us access to the main account, and your boy goes full woo the day of.
Yeah.
Just being very present, you know, breathing, a little bit nervous for this show. Anytime something is really important, I get that little bit of nerves, and I fucking love it. It makes me feel alive. So just walking on the beautiful beaches of Bali, Indonesia, feeling that sand on my feet, feeling the wind in my hair, just totally getting immersed in my senses and going full stoic zen. So that's kind of my routine. Of course, the morning practice, but we don't have to get into that again. What about you, bro? You're looking swole, trying to catch up? Not happening, baby.
Dude, I keep telling you to stop working out.
You should have told me you were trying to catch up, bro, because now I'm going so much fucking hard.
Dude, it's so funny. I always forget you're like literally on the other side of the earth. You know, it's like, yeah, I just woke up. It's morning time. I'm like, yeah, I just told my terrorist kids for 2 hours. You know, it's like, oh, it's 11 o'clock at night. But yeah, I got one in, bro. I got a gym session in. I do a lot of like these weird flow movements with the bands tied to like attached to the resistance cables. Did some of that, some core stuff, a little bit of rowing. Yeah, nothing crazy. Nothing crazy.
Would you do Pilates there, princess?
No, I'm not you.
Would you like Pilates? Fuck you, dude, man.
I used to talk so much crap about Pilates, and then when I lived in the city, there was one like attached to my building. Bro.
It's hard.
Whoo, that machine, you know what I'm talking about? Like whatever that is that like you're stationed on. It was one of those it was like they called it Pilates, but you were kind of like on this machine. It almost was like a cable machine where the base moved. Dude, we're like 7 minutes in. I have like a full puddle of sweat, and there's just a bunch of hot chicks like looking at me. I'm like, God, how do you do this? Like, I knew you people were insane.
Yeah, well, it's just like banded resistance mobility training, basically.
Yeah,
like that's
a lot of like,
right?
Yeah, a lot of like holding in the motions, though. You know, like full tension throughout the motion, which is, you know, you really don't get that a lot in traditional lifting. It was good, man. I got a lot of respect.
Anything you try that's hard, there's benefit in it, because when you're doing little things like that, you're targeting those smaller muscles that you often don't get with isolated exercises. And that's wonderful for injury prevention protocol.
Yeah, no, that stuff was a lot of respect for those chicks. That was tough. But dude, this was what a fun topic to research, man. This was I had no idea that intermittent fasting was like a racial slur to the bodybuilding community. I had no idea. like like dude, I like sent a couple texts out to like some buddies I used to like lift with, and they're like, intermittent fasting, like what is that trash? You know, would you let your kids fast? I'm like, what did you just say? But I swear. And then
Actually, I do, bro. I also fucking give them peptides in the middle of the morning.
yeah, right. So I thought that was really funny. I had no idea the true hatred that the bodybuilding community, I guess like the real meatheads, have for any type of intermittent fasting. I was like, guys, you didn't even hear it yet. Like it didn't even you don't even know what I'm gonna say. Why are you so angry? The best was my one buddy's like, dude, all the top athletes, like they don't do it. And I was like, oh, hey, bro, didn't know I was talking to a top athlete. Didn't.
It's like a Long Island construction worker. He's got like mayonnaise on his fucking coverall.
Literally. I was like, oh, didn't know I was talking to a top athlete. And like, that's what makes me laugh. So like, for me, this show is not about talking to top athletes, right? We are on Twitter. The people that are listening to this are closer to myself included, to a potato than a professional athlete. Like I was baffled. Like
and we don't want to ostracize any of our potato listeners. Okay,
no,
you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm one of those potatoes. But yeah, I just thought that was so funny. It's like, dude, what are you even like? If you were a professional athlete coming to a Twitter space for advice, like you're gonna get cut. Like you got, bro. Like that's just how that's gonna work.
I'm taking it they're already cut if they have the time to like drop in your DMs and go like, bro, intermittent fasting is not for my baby. This show is full of dangerous misinformation.
Dude, I don't want to take any screenshots just out of respect, but man, some funny DMs from these random people. Just
you have no problem posting my screenshots.
Yeah, blot your name out. I was trying to give you some clout. But yeah, this was it was fun, man. This was fun. You know, I've definitely I remember coming across intermittent fasting probably like 2014, I would say 2015. I thought it was interesting, you know, and it was more on like the holistic medicine side. You know, it wasn't a mainstream thing yet. It was I was actually helping a friend who had IBS. We were trying to figure out ways to help fix her stomach, and we came across. Dude, this is like the first time I came across Candida. We'll talk about Candida in a little bit. And all these different things to do with the gut. And all these holistic doctors were talking about fasting to help IBS, fasting to help just really get the gut biome back in order. And I was like, what is fasting? I thought it was like everyone else. I'm like, oh, starve yourself? That's cool. I could do that. But that was when I first came across it. And it's been interesting to dig back in, right? Like 10 years later and watch how the science has changed so much, you know, like what was considered this back then. And now they've changed a lot of it, but there definitely is these like core tenets that are like across all of them that we'll touch on, but it was cool, man. I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. What about you? How was your research?
Well, I think my first exposure to it was probably around the same time, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And it was that rat study. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Do you want to get into that rat study a little bit?
Yeah, well, wait, let's explain it.
Keep them watching,
well,
listening. All right.
Because one thing I want to do, one thing I want to do this episode compared to last episode is like really get into just the basics, kind of how we got here. You know, like what is intermittent fasting, right? And at its core, intermittent fasting is just a cycle of eating and not eating, right? They break it into windows. And I think it's important to not call it a diet, right? Because for a few reasons. One, when you call something a diet, then you look at it as a fad. And then you look at it like either I did it right or I did it wrong, and it's not going to be here forever, right? And secondly, this is not a diet because a diet restricts what you eat, where fasting is restricting when you eat. And to me, I think that is a big difference, right? And like something like fasting is a topic that I really like, because one thing about like the fitness and wellness space that I don't like is it's kind of turned into this thing where like, oh, well, you're going to need a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? Peptides are kind of a good example of that, where it's like peptides are not available to everyone. One, depending on where you live. Two, there's financial implications, right? Like peptides could get very expensive. So then you take something like fasting that's completely free, and it's like, man, this is great. Like, this is great. There is no barrier to entry.
It's not just free, it saves you money.
Yeah, well, that too, right? And that was another interesting
deficit, which is something that we learned going into this. So to go back to your question, what I learned, one, guys, there's no one size fits all. With anything that we're going to talk about, some things might work really well for you. Some things might not. There are certain small groups of people that have negative hormonal responses from too much fasting. It is a small subset, but there's no one size fits all. Something could work incredibly well for you, and it could not work for someone else. All I'm saying is, do your own research, and if it resonates with you, try it. You have nothing to lose. If you keep doing the same thing you've always been doing, you're going to get the same results. But if you try something for a week or two, maybe you'll change your life. So just try things. There's no one size fits all. What might work for me might be completely different than what works for Mang, maybe completely different than what works for someone else. The point of this show is just being a results maxi. Try different shit. If it works, build new habits. If it doesn't, then don't.
And even like within fasting, there's so much variation, which I like. I think that's cool. That's another thing that I find super beneficial about fasting. Like the last thing that we're going to do is sit here and tell you that you need to do a 16-hour, the famous 16-8 split. So what that means is you fast for 16 hours. So you don't eat for 16 hours. Then you have this 8-hour window where you eat. And that's kind of the most famous one. I'd say the most popular one. But by no means is that the only one. I personally don't do a 16-hour fast. I do mostly like a 12 to 13-hour fast. And I find that to be the sweet spot, right? And when I do research, I don't like to just focus on scientific studies. I definitely look at scientific studies. We'll talk about some of them. But I like to look at these like holistic doctors, these personal trainers. I have good friends that are personal trainers. And that data, I think that data is more important. And that data shows that if you take someone that eats all day, right, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep, and you just tell them, hey, man, you're going to stop eating around 8 o'clock p.m. and you're not going to eat until 8 a.m. That 12-hour window to a person that doesn't do any type of fasting will have some awesome benefits. It's usually weight loss, but the other ones we're going to talk about that get slept on are the cognitive ones, right? The gut biome stuff. And I think that's super important that it's flexible. And I think that's important that you could not change your diet, right? So if you're the guy that drinks 8 sodas and eats cheeseburgers all day, you could still fast. You know what I'm saying? You're just now going to do that within a window, as opposed to from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And I think the flexibility of fasting is cool because it lets more people try it, and when you think about fasting is not something new. Fasting is something that we've been doing as humans for 10,000 years. It goes back to hunter-gatherers, right? Now, they were doing it out of necessity back then. So you take a hunter-gatherer. They would go sometimes days without eating, whether it was because of a failed hunt, just seasonal weather conditions. They wouldn't get food. And then you add on top of it the energy exerted during a hunt, right? What happened was, to survive, for the human body to survive, we had to adapt. And what that adaptation was you have food, that's fuel. And then when you don't have food, you have these stored fats and glycogen in your body that's what it's going to use to survive until you get the next meal. And intuitively, it actually makes a lot of sense. When you hear people talk about fasting, they talk about how the cognitive benefits, right? How good it makes them feel. And the reason why that is really because of evolution, right? So if you think about it, if you haven't eaten for 2 days and your body's response is to become super tired, lethargic, brain fog, and angry, you're not going to be able to hunt. That's just like Darwinism. That's actually going to make you not go hunt. But for humans to survive, what happened was we would kick into this next gear, right? And what it would do is, and this is what we know now from modern studies on fasting, is that it decreases all cortisol levels, right? And what it does is once you get to a certain point, it releases something called GABA, which calms you down, but it also releases ketones, and ketones actually fuel your brain. So now you're actually calm, but you're sharper. And what it does is it actually cleans out dopamine receptors, so you feel good. And that's why people talk about this like euphoria when they're 36 hours into a fast. That's because of evolution, you needed to get sharper. Like you needed to go out and hunt. Like that's why that happens like that. And it kind of even ties back to war times. There's like the famous line, like you never go to war on a full stomach, right? You always go to battle on an empty stomach. And that's because of like the molecular benefits of that. And that all kind of ties back into fasting. But when it comes to like mainstream, fasting really started to hit like the website, like the forums back in like 2007 to 2010. There was this guy, his name was Martin Birkin, and he's the one that really popularized this 16-8 protocol. Again, that's you fast for 16 hours and you eat for 8 hours. And he had this super popular forum called Lean, I think it was Lean Gains, right? And he used to target bodybuilders and like these fitness enthusiasts. And he would say, look, if you do this fasting window, what's going to happen is you're going to deplete your glycogen stores during this fasting window, and you're going to burn fat, and you're not going to lose muscle loss as long as you keep strength training, right? And that was 2007 to 2010. And then from the medical side, in 2011, there was this study. It was an obesity review. And what they found was that fasting had like profound effects on glucose regulation and weight loss. That's something we're going to dive into in a little bit. But that's like really what got the ball rolling. You get to 2013, one of the best-selling books that year was this book called The 8-Hour Diet. And it's based on that 16-8 fasting window, right? And that's like really what made it so popular was, again, it didn't have to do with a diet that restricted food. It had to do with a protocol that restricted when you eat. And then the real one that kicked it off was in 2019, the New England Journal of Medicine. They studied 85 different tests on fasting. And what they came back with was there was definitive proof that fasting should be, not only was fasting effective, but it should be the first line of defense for diseases like type 2 diabetes. And then these metabolic diseases, right, that we see super prevalent today, like dementia and Alzheimer's. And they literally said like this should be the first line of defense. And what I found interesting about that was that study was popular for like 6 months and then poof, disappeared.
Wait. Now, what are you saying, man?
So I think you actually know a great story about Kellogg's, but when you think about it, right? So here's fasting. Who is going to benefit from you? Like who's paying for the marketing for fasting, right? So what do you think a big pharma? Exactly. When you think of big pharma, you think of big food. The last thing they want you to know is that you could do this fasting, something we've done for 10,000 years, and not only heal yourself, feel better, but like literally cure diseases, right? So it was funny when I was doing all this research, I made sure to go back and look at these articles. Like what was the FUD, right? What was the FUD on intermittent fasting? And it was a lot of it was just a bunch of junk. And I stepped back and I was like, well, this makes sense, right? Like what the money rules the world. And the only person that benefits from fasting is the person that does it himself, right? The last thing they want you to know is that you could cure a bunch of illness and cognitive brain fog and all this stuff from simply doing a fasting mechanism that we've done for thousands of years. So I thought that was super interesting. But I know when we were doing this research, you asked me if I knew about the Kellogg story. I think that's a great one. You should tell that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. And I think it goes back to the fact that, one, you can find this is something I'm going to reiterate. I know I said it. You can find studies that counteract any study out there. Like there's something called information bias. So if you want to believe something, you can find a study to believe it. But I think it's also very important to always, you know, put your tinfoil hat on, be optimistically skeptical or optimistically pessimistic, and wonder who benefits. Who actually benefits from it? If there is some sort of natural treatment or natural remedy that could fix a disease that there's maybe a lot of money being made on pharmaceuticals for, who could maybe benefit by disproving some of these what do they always call it? Pseudosciences.
Yeah, pseudoscience.
That's a great word that gets thrown around. These science. Oh, you're using natural medicine. You're using turmeric as anti-inflammatory. What are you, a fucking hippie, man? You know what I mean? So I found this story very, very interesting. It was an anecdote that I heard before. I'm going to read it off for you guys. So in the late 19th century, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, a physician and superintendent of the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, sought to reform American diets, observing that heavy breakfasts of meat and fried food caused indigestion amongst his patients. Now, do you think it was the meat or do you think it was the fried fucking dough? Anyways, I digress. Kellogg, a Seventh-day Adventist, developed a vegetarian health-focused regime. Around 1876, he experimented with grains, creating flaked corn cereal by accident when boiled wheat dough was left to dry and then baked. By 1984, he refined this into cornflakes, a bland, easy-to-digest food served at the sanitarium. Even the place they said,
Right.
would you like your cornflakes at the sanitarium? Kellogg saw cornflakes as a wholesome breakfast to promote physical and moral health. This is the important part, moral health. And with his brother, Will Keith Kellogg, he commercialized the project, founding the Kellogg Company. The cereal's simplicity aligned with his belief that plain foods curbed unhealthy appetites. So it became this moralist movement where people that anything from masturbation to sexual urges could be cured by this snake oil salesman, Dr. Kellogg. And that was part of that big movement of breakfast being the most important meal of the day. Now, I would caveat that with saying your first meal of the day probably is your most important meal of the day. But eating Frosted Flakes first thing in the morning while not giving your body any chance to digest, that's probably not the. What do you think, man? What do you think?
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. It speaks to one of the biggest problems we have in America, probably most of the Western world. I can only speak to America because that's where I am. When we eat, that breakfast is, especially cereal, is just carbs, which is sugar. So the first thing that you do when you wake up is you eat a bowl of carbs and sugar and spike your blood glucose through the roof, right? So that in turn almost always increases cortisol levels as well. But the problem,
more sensitive to insulin as well in the morning, right?
So that's what we're going to talk about too. Insulin sensitivity is such a big deal, right? So before we get into that, like I was saying, the research has gone in waves since 2007 to now. But there is like these kind of 6 things that remains constant this whole time, regardless of how long the window was, what kind of fasting you were doing. There's kind of these 6 components that we pulled out, and we're going to go through them one by one. And again, I cannot stress enough, if you have never fasted and you just try to do a 16-hour fast, you will fail for the most part.
With that attitude.
But like that's where I think a lot of people go wrong with stuff like this, is they go from eating from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep to just trying a 16-8 window, right? Where you literally just eat for 8 hours. And the chances of that being successful are very, very small. Where I think the best way to start is just try a 12-hour window. Try it for a week. I find it
so easy.
That's my thing. I find it to be super easy.
It could not be like, the thing is, guys, like I do 16-8. I've been doing that for a long time. A lot of the time I do 18-6. It's very, very, maybe 18-6 is too much depending what you're doing. Maybe you have a job you have to run to. You need to get something in before that. Different people's lifestyles accommodate different habits and behavior. But it's more, a lot of this is more of just being mindful of what you're eating and when you're eating. It's actually 12-12 incredibly easy. You just have to not stuff your face before you fall asleep and not eat the second you wake up. That's literally eating your last meal at 6 p.m., eating your first meal at 6 a.m.
Yeah, or like how I do it is 8 and 8. So I stop eating at 8 because I go to sleep pretty late, right? So I go to bed usually till too late, like midnight. But so I stop eating at 8. There's actually a lot of studies that show that it's actually super important, the space that you have between the time you stop eating and you go to bed than the time when you wake up and eat, in terms of the effects on blood glucose and insulin sensitivity.
So like important.
So, and especially like when you sleep, you want to be healing. You want to give your gut a break. You want everything. You want those insulin levels to come down. You want the blood sugar levels to come down, because that really affects one. It's the cognitive, how deep your sleep is going to be. If you go to sleep on a full stomach, you're actually never sleeping, right? Like you're digesting that whole time. And then when you think about it, if you just remove that part, right? That this is why I think fasting like at a 12-hour window as an introduction is so important and effective. Because when you just think about that, you go to bed, you eat that whatever, ice cream, half hour before you go to sleep. Your body's digesting that all night. Usually, depends on the body type, but like an endomorph, right? So that's like a bigger guy. Your blood glucose levels could stay elevated for up to 3 hours after one meal, right? So when you think about that, that means that the only time you really have a break is probably overnight for a few hours. And then you wake up, you eat that bagel, right? And then you have coffee at 9 o'clock. And then you have lunch. And then you have a snack. And then you have dinner. And then you have dessert. So you're never really giving your body a chance to break anything down, to have a break. And the problem with that is your gut biome needs to build itself back up, right? So just that simple 12-hour fast, I think, is highly effective for someone that's never done fasting before. I think it's a great place to start. But one of the common factors...
Before you move on, I just want to re-emphasize, I used to stuff my face before I was in Canada. I would smoke. I would stuff my face literally until the moment I fell asleep. And here's the interesting thing, guys. If you're always doing something, for instance, it's when people say, I don't get that hungover, but they're drinking all the time. You get used to whatever you're doing, so you don't have any contrast of how bad it's actually making you feel. That's why it's so important to try these things out, because I had no idea at the time, because I would do it every night. I didn't realize how bad it was actually making me feel until I stopped doing it. And now I religiously 3 hours out, like I'm done eating, and you'll just notice an incredible difference, not only with fat composition and lean muscle mass, but with just how you feel. Sleep is so important, man. We're going to do a whole episode on sleep.
So I would say one of the really cool first things that remains constant is that fasting promotes cellular repair and longevity. Right. So what that means is, like, during fasting, your body initiates this process called autophagy.
Oh, you got the word right.
Yeah, God, I was worried I was going to get it wrong. And what that means is it like repairs all these damaged cells in your body, recharges mitochondria. There is literal studies that show that autophagy could actually help stop. It kills cancer cells, right? It does a ton of cool stuff.
We don't want to get sued.
Oh, I mean, that's in the research for sure. Allegedly. That was in that. That was, yeah, sure, allegedly, but that was in the New England Journal of Medicine.
By Pfizer, bro, be cool.
Yeah, you're right. But that, I think that's really cool to know that your body actually is able to heal itself if you just give it a chance, right? But what happens is we live in a world now where we don't. We do something that's called unconscious eating, right? Everyone's guilty of it, and unless you're very strict and you focus. But most people, they think about food at least 200 times a day. They make a decision on food about 200 times a day without even thinking about it. And unless you track what you eat, there's a good chance that you're eating a ton of things that you don't even realize, right? Whether it's that like hand of popcorn, whatever it is. And the problem with unconscious eating is it doesn't give your blood glucose level. It doesn't give your body a chance to kick into what we call metabolic switching, right? So I would say autophagy is really cool. But the only problem is to get into that, you have to fast. There's no way around it, right? So to get to autophagy, what has to happen is what happens is when we eat, we have two sources of food, two sources of energy. It's really like the sugar machine and then what I call like the fat machine. So the sugar machine is basically when we're eating. So when we're eating, what happens is blood glucose, like glucose is in the blood, we use that as energy. That's what we burn the whole time. And then once you stop eating and you go into a fast, however, for whatever reason, right, usually it starts to kick in around 10 to 12 hours. Your body kicks into something what's called metabolic switching, and it kind of goes to the fat machine for energy. And what it does is the body goes, all right, our blood glucose levels are down, our insulin levels are down, there's no food in our system. We're going to go start to switch to what's called ketosis, where we're going to use fat and store glycogen for energy. Once you do that, that's kind of where the benefits of fasting start to begin. But it's not until you hit the 17-hour mark that autophagy kicks in. And again, this has to do with evolution and Darwinism, right? This has to do with we were starving and the body was like, hey, man, we're not getting food. We're going to start to burn all this off. And that's kind of where it starts to kick in. Like I do, again, I'm not going to recommend anything to anyone, but at least once a year, I do a 72-hour water fast. And I do it for that reason. I do it so that I could do this hard reset on my body, right? Burn off all whatever bad cells I have, clean out my gut biome. But that is just like a really cool benefit of fasting. But in order to kick in any type of ketosis the right way, you could take ketones, but if you're just eating shit and you eat ketones, it's actually dangerous.
How did you feel when you did that fast?
So the first one's terrible. The first, I would say the first 24 hours, and then like from like hour like 48 to 58 are tough. And then you kind of like just get past it. But you do get to this point where you're like laser focused, man.
I was going to say, because I've done like a 6-7 day fast, ooh, and it's very strange by the end of it. Like you go through waves, but then somehow by the end, I've had friends that have done 2-3 weeks. That guy, Gary, we like from Human Garage, he said he's done 2 or 3 week dry fast. That's what he says.
No, I'm sure he has, dude. That guy's crazy.
But it surprises you that you get past these plateaus and somehow you have all of this energy. Like you're not, it really kind of blows your mind. It makes you kind of re-examine your relationship with food. And like you said, it can do that hard reset.
So like that's the second thing that remains constant throughout all this is that fasting boosts your brain function and mental clarity. And there's actually like scientific reasons to prove that. So what happens is when you go into a fast, you increase the production of, it's called like BDNF.
Brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
So what those are like these proteins that support cognitive function. And it reduces neurodegenerative diseases. And the other thing is ketones, right? So we talked about ketones. Once you switch to that fat burning energy, you release into the body what's called ketones. And why ketones are important is they represent like up to 50% of our brain's energy. So most people, like they have a ton of brain fog, right? And, you know, they're in their 30s. They don't know why. The reason for that is because they never burn off all the sugar in their blood. They never switch, right? There is no metabolic switching. They just remain burning on a sugar engine the entire time. So they don't get the benefits of these ketones. And I would say that's the best for me. I think that's the best part of fasting. And again, I do like a 12 to 14 hour window tops like that. And you still get these functions because you kick into this fat burning mechanism where you're releasing these ketones. And when you release ketones, you release GABA, right? So GABA calms you down. And when you release these ketones, you start to restore dopamine receptors. They get cleaned out. So you start to feel good. So you get this like mental clarity and your cognitive function increases. And I think that's something that, like, again, for these bodybuilders that were yelling at me, they would never understand that unless they try it, right? And I get, for the record, I get where they're coming from. These guys are bulking, you know, it's probably very hard to hit macros in a short window if you're eating that much.
Dude, when I do 18-6, which is pretty common, And that's a lot of the effects people get too from intermittent fasting is because they have such a short window. And we're not talking about 12-12 now. We're talking about these shorter windows. It's incredibly hard to overeat if you're in a small window. Like when I'm doing 18-6, it is a challenge just getting in enough calories.
Especially if you're eating like clean food, like whole foods. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand how hard it is to sit down and eat a pound of ground beef, just a pound of ground beef. You know what I mean? Like if you're not, if you're not used to that, man, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, especially coming off an empty stomach, right? So that's like one thing that I think people don't understand unless they try it. But then for society right now, I would say the most important byproduct of fasting is how it improves insulin sensitivity, which lowers the risk of type 2 diabetes. The type 2 diabetes data in America, diabetes data in general, is insane, right? I'm pretty sure as of last year, it was like almost 12% of Americans have diabetes, right?
Dude, your entire country is bulking.
Yeah. And what's even crazier about that is there is kids as young as like 10 years old getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And what's even crazier about that, right? So you take 12% of Americans have diabetes. 90 to 95% of those cases are type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a fancy way of saying self-induced diabetes. Type 2 diabetes in almost all cases can be reversed.
Your victim blame.
Now, I actually have a cool story because my dad did this, right? So my dad got type 2 diabetes because he was eating, I mean, since I could remember, anytime we stopped at the gas station, he's getting Milky Way, like, ate like a total degenerate and got type 2 diabetes, was on insulin, all this stuff. And I actually showed him Dr. Sean Baker. Do you know who that is? The buff dude that eats all the steak. So I had been talking
all day. He's such an asshole.
He's those videos. He's just sitting there cutting the steak. He's just like. So I had been talking to my dad about a carnivore diet and just trying to fix. Like, I'm like, dude, you do this. Like, you did this to yourself, and the beautiful thing is because you did, you could get yourself out of it. Like, there's a ton of studies on it, and it took him like a year and a half, and no shit, eating a carnivore-based diet. He started strictly carnivore, but he changed it. He was able to add some other things. Dude, he was able to come off almost all of those type 2 diabetes. His A1C came down. His blood pressure came down. His heart scans were great. No blood vessel damage in the cardiovascular region. All from eating, like cutting out the crap. Again, basic window, 12-hour window, nothing crazy, but basically ate a lot of meat, little bit of fruit. And he was able to come off almost all that medicine, dude. I think he has insulin for when he needs it. He still checks his blood sugar every morning, but it's fixable, completely fixed. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in America right now is we have this like notion that medicine's the only thing that can fix us, right? And I don't know if that's because it's kind of drilled into our heads, but the truth is all the answers we have within our body, the human body is incredibly resilient. And why fasting helps so much with type 2 diabetes is insulin sensitivity, right? So the problem is when you eat all day, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, your blood glucose is high. So what happens is your pancreas has to keep producing insulin. And what happens is you get like, I forget what they call it, insulin restriction, where it becomes less effective. The insulin becomes less effective at bringing your blood sugar down. And that's why you have to take insulin, right? But when really, if you do a fast, if you start to implement some type of fasting window, that actually brings that blood glucose sugar down, that blood glucose level down, and it helps your body regenerate itself. And like that should be the first line of defense to type 2 diet when you're pre-type 2 diabetic, which I want to say as of 2023, it was 38% of Americans were pre-type 2 diabetic, right? So like, that's why, like when I say I'm coming here trying to talk to the regular person, it's like, look, man, all I'm telling you is start with a 12-hour window. Like that's it. Like just start there. And it would help solve so much of the type 2 diabetes because type 2 diabetes is not good. It leads to cardiovascular disease, strokes. Here's another great example. Type 3 diabetes, you'll start to hear about this, is dementia. Type 3 diabetes just means that you are so inflamed that your brain is inflamed. That's all that is.
That actually
And that
blew my mind
is,
when you told me that earlier.
yeah, and you can look that up. And that is a byproduct of having high blood sugar your whole life for a sustained amount of time. And to think that you could just stop that by implementing these certain things. And again, why I think fasting is cooler than a diet is because how it starts is you're not saying you can't eat this. You're just saying this is when you could eat it. And I think that's a lot easier, especially for a male, right? Like for men. Like you tell a man they can't do something, they're like, yeah, bro, what? What do you mean I can't eat that? I fucking love my cheeseburgers. And it's like, you know what I'm saying is you can still eat those cheeseburgers. Just eat it between this window. We're going to start here. And I think that that's an easier way to get someone to do something sustainably, right? The problem with diets is they're so insustainable, right? I mean, how many people do you know that do these diets and they just yo-yo, right? They lose the weight, but the diet's so impractical.
I think that's everything though, bro. People, they want these instant fixes, right? So they take Ozempic, they try these extreme diets, whatever it is. It's not about that. It's about creating just minor, the easier the changes are to implement in your life, and the few you try to add at once, the more likely you're actually to be coherent with it. So start easy, start small, take tiny little steps that you can implement every single day and repeat. It's way better to start small and be able to continue to do that day in and day out than go through these big yo-yos.
So Rage said it's Alzheimer's. I knew it was one of these metabolic diseases, not dementia, which
one of the things that tinkers with your ticker.
Yeah, pretty similar. But yeah, so it's Alzheimer's. That's called type 3 diabetes. And that is directly from diet, man. I'm sure there's some genetics tied to it, but make no mistake, that is fueled by your diet, and not just, obviously not a good diet, right? By a diet that's full of sugar.
You know, like the bro science will say, oh, well, it's just calories in, bro, as long as you're hitting your macros. But inflammation's a real thing. And dietary inflammation and the way it affects your body, that's a massive thing. Yeah. Like, yes, macros. Yeah, if you're on a ton of gear, you can eat a bunch of ice cream and pizza and still get yoked. But you got to look at, you know, the cognitive effects, the other effects that are actually happening in your body when you're in this state of chronic inflammation. Like a calorie, I'm sorry, like a calorie, in my opinion, there's a big difference between a clean calorie and a totally dirty one. Maybe not on a cheat day, but consistently over time, inflammation's a motherfucker.
Yeah, and it really is like so inflammation is a key contributor to arthritis, cancer, heart disease. I probably just named, you know, cancer and heart disease, I think, are either 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 of the top deaths of Americans, right? And I just feel like that is a very slept upon thing with fasting, how it reduces inflammation and this oxidative stress, right? That I would say that's the fourth point, that it absolutely, the data proves it. It reduces inflammation and these oxidative stresses. Again, how it reduces oxidative stresses, because when you break these things down and you go into a ketosis state and you're releasing ketones, it releases GABA. GABA calms you down as well. Like all that stuff ties back to type 2 diabetes. And then the last thing I would say that ties it all together is it supports gut health and digestion. And a lot of that came from the 2019 New England Journal of Medicine studies, where they basically showed that if you fast, what it does is it kind of recharges your gut biome. So a lot of the cravings that you have for sugar and carbs come from the bacteria in your stomach, right? So one of the most commonly known ones, especially on the holistic side. Yeah, Candida. Absolutely. So Candida, most people have Candida. Again, it has to do with just like the bacteria in your stomach. But if you have like incredible urges for sugar and carbs that almost seem like irrational, there's a good chance that you have Candida and your gut biome is all jacked up.
And it's not just cravings. It can also result in anything from acne to dermatitis.
Yeah, good point.
If you look at your fingernails and you have like your fingernails like kind of like ridged and like gritty and weird, like that can be a fungal infection. Or if you're prone to getting fungal infections, yeast infections in women, obviously partly that can be hygiene. but that can also be a direct manifestation of candida. And if you've ever tried to do a candida fast, it's really hard and
Super
really
hard.
restrictive, and it takes months.
Yeah, no, it's super hard. So like I said, that's how I found out about a lot of this stuff, was trying to help my friend with IBS. And it was kind of crazy. She was going to the Cleveland Clinic, going to some like real place, driving from New York City down to Ohio to go to the Cleveland Clinic. And they were just telling her that, I mean, at one point they were like, we might have to wear a colostomy bag. We're going to try to do all this stuff, because she was putting on weight. She was a skinny girl that put on like 60 pounds in 4 months. It was sad. Like she had no control over it. And these doctors were saying like, this is what it is. It's your body. There's nothing we could do about it. But then the holistic doctors are like, no, look, like you probably have candida. Your gut biome's all jacked up.
Pseudoscience quacks.
Dude, and we were telling us the diet to go on. And don't get me wrong, it took 2 years, but she did. She figured it out. And she had leaky gut. She had candida. And the thing with candida is candida thrives on sugar and carbs, right? So the only way to cut to stop candida from growing in your gut is to cut all of that out, like you said, for a sustained amount of time. And fasting actually helps do that, because when you fast, you eat nothing.
What else helps with leaky gut? BPC 157 taken orally. You can see our first episode for that.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was super interesting, that just by fasting. Now, in full disclosure, in those studies, they did find that once you left the fasting window and if you went back to eating the same thing, your gut biome would go back. But what it proved was that just by fasting, you could recharge your gut biome, right? And that's kind of how I look at it. When you do a fast, if you're going to do like a 72-hour fast, you should come out of that thinking like, I got a clean slate, right? I'm going to eat this kimchi. I'm going to focus on probiotics. I'm going to eat clean, because you basically just gave yourself a fresh start, right? That's how I always looked at when I do those 72-hour fasts. I did, so this year, I only did one so far this year. I did it back in like April. 72 hours, I drink water with like an electrolyte packet, a sugar-free one. And yeah, it's like 72 hours. But when I'm done, I don't go pig out. Like the first thing I eat is a ton of kimchi, right? Just want to charge that, get some fermented foods in there, like start it off right. And I'm telling you, when you come off something like that, it feels great. But again, this stream is about just trying to get someone that's never did a fast to try a 12-hour window. Just try it for a week. I really don't think it's as difficult as people expect it to be, especially if you're just doing, like I said, like an 8 to 8. It depends on your work schedule, right? Like I'll be the first one to say 16-hour fast is tough for me. It is. That's it. It's a tough one for me, man. That's why I don't really do them that much. I'm trying to think what mine was today.
A lot of people
like 13 hours
by accident. Like if you've ever skipped breakfast for the day, you did intermittent fasting inadvertently. Yeah,
for sure. No, that what I'd say is my main takeaway from a lot of this research was like
fasting.
The research changes, but these are kind of the core tenets on what works, why it works. And I think that's that's kind of like the important thing to take away from it is like, look, there's a ton of different windows you could do. We should probably talk about that, right? So 16-8 is like that's like the kind of gold standard. Then you have something that's called the 5-2, where you eat regular for 5 days. And then those last 2 days, you restrict down to like a smaller window. And I guess it actually coincides with smaller calories for some reason. That's why that one was weird to me. But then you have what they call the warrior diet, where you eat just once a day.
What kind of window would you do on the 5-2?
So that's what's weird is it always talked about calorie count in the 5-2, which I was like, how is that considered fasting then? But I guess it is. So the 5-2, if you eat, deficit. Yeah, so it must be based on a 2,000 calorie window, 2,000 calorie diet. So for those 5 days, you eat your 2,000 calories, but then the last 2, you do 500 to 600 calories for those 2 days. So that's what the 5-2 is. And then you have what they call the warrior diet, where you eat once a day, big meal. I actually know people that do that, and they'll eat like 3 pounds of meat. like
I
once a
feel
day.
so I would inadvertently do that. Like I would just forget to eat, streaming, working. I'd end up doing 24 windows, like 20 hours fasting for eating. And it is tremendously hard to get enough calories. Like you feel like shit. I just fall asleep.
Yeah, and the other one is the on off, where you eat, like you'll eat for a full day, but then you won't eat for 24 hours. I did for months back when I was a dock builder in the city. Every Friday, I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't eat. I would eat Thursday night, and then I wouldn't eat again until I think usually Saturday morning. Like I wouldn't even eat. I would just not eat all of Friday.
How
And I found that great, dude.
Really?
Yeah. And I found it was super beneficial going into the weekend. You know what I mean? Like Saturday, I would eat those eggs in the morning, and because I was training, I was running a lot. So Saturday morning, I would wake up, I would eat some eggs, and then I would go run, and I would feel incredible. And I liked it because I knew that I was getting those benefits of an extended fast, right? Because that is one thing to remind everyone, that autophagy doesn't really kick in until a 17-hour fast, right? So if you're in like a 12-hour or a 14-hour window, you're not gonna get that part. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because you're still getting all the other benefits. But like in terms of getting rid of damaged cells and stuff, that doesn't kick in until hour 17. So
yeah, and if you're tuning into the stream, that's all autophagy is. It's just old cells being broken down, new cells being built.
Yeah, which is like crazy. Our own body does that, right? Like it's just like such a well-oiled machine.
It has a miraculous ability to heal itself. It really does. And I think a good analogy to dumb it down for my fellow gym bros, because I can barely understand what this guy's saying, is it's just recovery. That's all it is, right? We all know at this point one of the most important parts of training and building new muscles, building new habits is recovery. You can't pump the guns every single day. So that's all you're doing with this fasting. You're just giving your gut a little ability to recover, to do its own thing. That's it.
And the brain too. The brain. I really think the brain gets left out a lot of fasting. People think, well, I'm going to lose muscle. I'm going to do this. And it's like, well, what if I tell you this is about longevity? This is not about tomorrow. This is about 20 years from now. Because that is one thing that stands true through all that data, is that some type of this type of fasting is good for longevity. It's good for your brain. And that's, I just think that gets left out. It gets left out of it. People just think that
do you want to look like Brian Johnson, bro? Or do you want to look like Thor, dude?
Dude, that guy,
he might be listening. Let's be cool. He might be on the show later.
Dude, he freaks me out.
We're a fan. I'm a fan of you.
Yeah, he freaks me out. He looks like he wears people's faces.
Well, I think that's the problem with fitness in general, right? And just life in general. People aren't really playing that long game. They're willing to trade their future. I think it was, I'm trying to remember the exact study. I'm probably going to butcher this, guys, but they asked a bunch of Olympic athletes, like, would you rather win a gold and know you were going to die in the next 10 years or something, or not win a gold? And a resounding, I might be totally butchering the numbers, but a resounding amount said the gold.
The gold. Yeah, it's crazy. So Rage said, I've been intermittent fasting for 8 years and I'm jacked. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the research kind of proves that too, man.
Rage is very jacked.
Yeah, no, I think the research proves that too. I think a lot of the bodybuilding people kind of buy into this fact that, like, I remember being in a bodybuilding gym and they took pride in how hard it was to eat all that food, because it is. That's a difficult. I couldn't do it. My body didn't operate good like that. And I think they kind of keep that in there. Like one guy was telling me today that it's good to eat before you go to bed because of your basal metabolic rate.
I don't even know what that is.
And I was just like, I just objectively don't think that that's true. I don't think it's good to eat right before you go to bed. Like, I just don't.
Well, again, you can do your own experiment. If you have a wearable, try eating a big meal right before bed. Track your sleep. Try the next day eating 3 hours out, and you can see. You can.
Yeah, that's true. You could just. I didn't even think of that. If you have a wearable, look at what a full meal does.
You don't have to take anyone's advice. This is demonstratable.
I didn't even think of that.
And what happens if you crash your sleep, right? Maybe this works for a bodybuilder, right? Because they're taking high amounts of exogenous testosterone, growth hormone. They don't require their body to endogenously create all of these. But what happens when your sleep is crashed? You're not endogenously creating the right amounts of growth hormone, testosterone. So it's a completely different game, whether you're natty or not.
Oh, that's another thing too that fasting does. Once you hit autophagy, you create growth hormone in your stomach. That was proven in the studies. Oh, Tim Tequila, that's my man. What's up? Oh, he's been in intermittent fasting for 2 years now.
Dom too. Fasting changed my life.
Love that. Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's kind of my closing statements on intermittent fasting is I thought this was a lot of fun to research. It's something I've been doing for a long time. It was cool to see how the research has like bounced back and forth, which by the way, that's how science is supposed to work. You're supposed to keep testing it, seeing what works and what doesn't. But in the end, I find it hard for anyone to argue that starting with just a 12-hour fasting window is bad for you. I just can't figure that out. You can't. I would love to have someone on, like a bodybuilder that thinks this is bad, that thinks it's terrible. I would love to have him on just to talk, not combatively, just to hear him out, to hear what they have to say, because all the research that I found just flies in the face of that, man.
So the basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy your body needs to fuel these functions over 24 hours if you did nothing but lie still.
Interesting.
And that was a result of a lot of the literature we read as well, right? It was, the amount of weight you lost, fat you burnt really boiled down to your caloric intake. That was one thing that really surprised me, actually. They took studies of people eating the exact same amount of calories. Because I always thought that if you worked out fasted, if you ran fasted, you were going to burn a lot more fat, not dietary fat, body fat. And they found you would momentarily, but by the end of the day, if you were looking at just caloric input, it stayed the same. The results were the same across. So a lot of people, including myself, thought it was gospel to do your exercise, do your workout fasted. And actually, the studies are suggesting it doesn't really matter. So if you prefer to work out and do cardio fasted, you can. But if you prefer to eat something, now, again, it's important what you're eating.
What you're
eating. Are you eating
yeah.
protein? Or are you eating sugar? That's really, really important. Sugar good rule of thumb, protein in the morning, sugar after your workout.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not necessarily what you're eating, but when you're eating it. This is really important.
That was another thing that was interesting to take away from that. The guy that was on Huberman, I'm drawing a blank on his name, how he basically said, like, I remember the gym gospel was like, you got to get that protein in within a half hour. After you work out, you're going to die. And it was like, no, it's actually not true. Especially just based on if you have a good diet, like that's not true. Like it's okay. And I was like, that's great. Because there's so many times where, you're working out and you literally have to take a shower and you're going to dinner, like there's just, or whatever happens where you're like, man, did I just waste this workout? And it's like, no, actually, that's not true. I thought that was because that's new data, right? That was definitely new data.
Tim has something else I learned, and then we'll get to Tim's question as well. As there was a lot, I've heard this repeated on Rogan a couple times, that your body can only digest 30 amounts.
Yeah, the 30 grams. Yeah.
30 grams of protein, and anything else will go over, what is it? Carb. I don't even know the word. The rest will be turned into glycogen later. They found that that's not necessarily true either. It could be, they found increased benefit upwards to 50 plus grams.
Yep. That was a crazy podcast. That was a good one.
Yeah,
Tim, what about something like yogurt? So I subscribe to full fat yogurts are very good for you. Especially if you have children. Full fat yogurts for children are great because fat for a child is very good for their brain. Same with us, right? What is it? 70% of our brain's fat. But I eat a ton of full fat yogurt from the local farmer's market. There's definitely a decently high amount of sugar in there. I would say probably like 8 to 11 grams of sugar in yogurt. But I think that the fermentation cancels a lot of that out, in my opinion. I'll actually do some research on that because I would love to know. But
I make my own coconut kefir too. Just kefir grain. You can do this yourself. It's really fun. You can go on Amazon, get some kefir grains. You can take coconut cream with no preservatives. You can mix the grains in with the coconut cream. You got your own yogurt. Something fun you can do with your kids. Something I like to do. And then that's a totally sugar-free yogurt. But it's also, they always say that it's better. Like if you're going to eat sugar, specifically in the morning, combining it with something else will always be more advantageous. That's going to slow down the release of that glycogen. For instance, instead of just eating an apple, eat an apple with almond butter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a pre-workout snack. Okay. That's like another cool thing about it. It's, however, everyone's body is different. I love yogurt, man. I definitely eat. We get 2 of them every week. It's 2 for $10. They're like a quart. I get plain, not flavored. And my kids crush them. I crush it. And I'm a big fan of yogurt. But I think this was good. This was a great stream. Does anyone else have any other questions?
It was fun, bro. I was nervous. You know, I was nervous. You were holding my hand before the stream. I'm like, bro, I've been listening to Huberman all week. I'm not a neuroscientist.
I liked how the research changed, but I think my favorite part was how angry. I had no idea that bodybuilders hated it that much. I really didn't know. That was really funny. That was a funny thing to witness. Like professional athletes.
Different goals, different things. Like, you know, you do got to eat big to get big. If you're trying to be Mr. Olympia, which I'm sure none of you watching this are trying to be Mr. Olympia.
My whole fucking point.
But if you're trying to just put on as much size as possible, yeah, you're probably not going to intermittent fast. If you're trying to just look great, live a healthy life, focused on performance and longevity, give it a try.
No, that was awesome. And just so you guys know, we had the wildest technical difficulties.
Bro, I was cracking.
I thought we were going to lose Sean tonight for a little bit, guys. But yeah, dude, thank you so much for showing up. This was a lot of fun. And I think next week we're going to try to do an interview. We're going to see who's available. Try to get some jacked guys. We have one guy in mind. If he comes on, I'm making him wear a hoodie. But aside from that, if not, we'll pick a topic. I think sleep would be a great topic. But yeah, we're definitely going to mix in some interviews into this. I think that's a great way I love to learn from other people. And I think that stuff's really entertaining. Probably bring on some personal guys that have personal training experience, different views. It's all about learning, guys. Trying to learn, trying to get jacked, trying to be healthy, right?
Yeah, and again, we're not experts, right? We're learning a lot of stuff for this stream. So, you know, have that curiosity with life. Learn things yourself. Just because you heard it here, like do your own information, dig in. There's always new studies. It's fun, man. You want to always have that growth mindset. So many people, including myself, we hear one thing and then we never look into that. And then we just tell other people like it's gospel. So, you know, always be adaptive. Try new things. If they work, great. If they don't, whatever. But always have that.
Try it. If you've never done any type of fasting window, I would say just try a 12-hour fasting window. Stop eating at 8 p.m. Start eating at 8 a.m. Try it for a week. I think you'd be very surprised how easy it is and how much energy you have, how much better you feel. But yeah, just give it a shot. Take a chance. Columbus did, right?
Yeah, and if I could give one piece of personal experience, try that 3-hour window before bed. Just try, see how you feel. Make your last meal 3 hours before bed. Don't eat anything, and let me know how that goes for you because it's really changed my life.
Yeah, it's a great call. The before bed one's a great call. Start there. But yeah, that was awesome, Sean. I appreciate you, bro. Thank you.
Was it okay? You know, I was nervous.
Yeah, you did great. All right, guys. Until next time, I appreciate you all stopping by. Stay Giga.
Giga Motion, motherfuckers. Oh, peace. I was supposed to play the outro.
Most of us often chase rather pumps than established memes. And a green candle is somehow spoiled for us until it's screenshot. We stare at charts, forgetting it changes nothing. We watch charts, but not ourselves. This is a disaster. For as a result of confusing dopamine hits with actual profit, we are destroying our net worth. We are so tied up in FOMO and charts that we've lost all conviction. Time to wake up. What is alpha? Obviously, nobody can say, because it isn't just drawing lines on charts. It isn't rotation meta, that's just an idea. Alpha is the Giga cycle cannot be explained in words.